I think about this a lot. It's from the first issue of a punk rock zine called Sideburns. Created in January of 1977, about as early as something like this could have been created, this illustration has often been said to epitomize the entire punk movement. You don't need to be a virtuoso musician to play punk. In fact, it might even be a hindrance. All you need is the bare minimum of technical knowledge, and something you want to express with it. This is a chord. This is another. This is a third. Now form a band. Game design is quite a bit different from music, and from any other art form for that matter. But if I were to point to a movement in game design that, to me, most resembles the punk movement, it would be the games made with RPG Maker. That might sound a little strange, but hear me out. RPG Maker is famously easy to use, more so than any other game design software. And RPGs themselves, broadly defined as that genre may be, were some of the earliest examples of real narratives in video games. To make an RPG, essentially, is to tell a story, to express. Combine an easy-to-use design program and a design paradigm that, by its very nature, rewards emotional honesty and, well, here's an engine. Here are some assets. Now make a game. There are literally too many examples for me to count. I could bring up something like Omori, probably the most famous RPG Maker game of all time, and the utterly unflinching way it handles the topic of mental illness. If you've been around as long as I have, you may remember 2004's Yuki, a surreal adventure game so singular in vision that for 20 years it served as a primary example of the kind of artistic freedom RPG Maker allows. But I'd like to go back even farther than that. All the way back to 1997, when RPG Maker existed on the Japan-only PC-98 computer, into a game which I consider, admittedly in the absence of much other evidence, to be the first bona fide RPG Maker masterpiece. Azusa 3.9, pronounced that way in reference to the classic sci-fi anime Galaxy Express 3.9, was, like most RPG Maker projects, made by a single person. That developer, a 19-year-old named Ichiro Sogabe, had some experience with the engine already. His previous creation, Clock, which at the time of writing is still untranslated, was made 2 months beforehand and netted him a small prize at that month's Conpark competition. And what was Conpark? The Internet Contest Park was a smaller monthly offshoot of an annual contest run by Enterbrain, the company that makes RPG Maker, since 1995. The annual contest had a grand prize equivalent to a whopping 100 grand in today's USD, and was once won by the original version of Corpse Party, fun fact. But the Conpark contests generally only awarded amounts in the hundreds of dollars. Enough to be a nice reward for a hobbyist, but not enough to replace your day job. The perfect incentive, though, for a young man with few obligations, but a lot to say. So, he said it. And in October of 1997, Sogabe submitted Azusa 3.9 to that month's Conpark, where it netted him a little over $650 in today's USD. In 2020, it was discovered by the translator Samuel Messner, who released a fan translation, and also found a way to make it run as a standalone EXE, so no knowledge of PC-98 emulation is required. That level of dedication probably seems a little crazy for a small indie game made nearly 3 decades ago. It did to me, and that skepticism was a big reason why I checked out Azusa 3.9 in the first place. Surely it's not worth all that trouble, right? Well, it is free. Let's give it a shot. By the end of my first playthrough, I was convinced. Azusa 3.9 is something special. And I hope, by the end of this video, you'll be convinced too. After a disarmingly adorable drawing, credited to an Azusa Kato, age 4, Azusa, huh? We're greeted with a note from the translator, informing us that Azusa 3.9 contains references to Japanese pop culture that will fly over the head of most players, and to check out the player's companion that comes included with the translation anytime one of those references is noted in-game. I'm not going to go over all of those references in detail since, to me, they seem mostly like window dressing, but if you're interested, download the game and give it a look yourself. With that out of the way, we start the game proper, and get our first taste of Azusa 3.9's distinct visual style. A grayscale character stands against a field of pure white. And we hear the first sounds of the game, a loud dinging sound that, when played with headphones at full volume, is utterly abrasive. What on earth could that be? We walk down a screen and we get our answer. It's a railroad crossing. Walking up to the train track, our character, their name given simply as Me, stands there in silence for a moment. Then they begin to speak. If I died... If I died, would the pain go away? Surely, it'd at least be better than this. Then we're given a choice. Jump? Yes or no? If you know anything about old JRPGs, you may be familiar with the phrase, "but thou must." It comes from the original Dragon Quest, where the player can refuse a request from an NPC to join them, only to be met with, "but thou must." The game won't progress until the player acquiesces. This isn't quite the same as Dragon Quest. If you say no, the game just immediately cuts to credits. But still, hell of a way to invoke that old trope and turn it on its head. To start the game, you're required to give in to despair. So we do. As we jump onto the tracks, we see that the train is crimson, unlike any other train we've ever seen. Oh well, that won't be relevant in a moment. Wait a minute. We're not dead, are we? After the title card, a voice calls for us, and we wake up in a seat on a nearly empty train car. Nearly empty, that is, except for the blob shaped vaguely like a train attendant just north of us. The attendant asks us for a ticket, which, of course, we don't have. We weren't planning to ride this train today, after all. We ask where exactly we are, a question which falls on deaf ears. Failing that, we try to buy a ticket, but the attendant informs us that our money's no good here. But something can be worked out. We can ride for free. All we have to do is just check the tickets of all the other passengers. We readily agree to that and even get a cool job title of assistant attendant. Off we go. Just one thing. You may notice that the train noise from earlier hasn't stopped. If you play this game yourself, I recommend playing with the volume turned down a little since it can get pretty grating. With that in mind, there is music that plays later in the game, and I'll bring the volume back up for that, but for now I'm going to turn the sound down a little and play something else in the background. Anyway, we make our way down the train and we're introduced to our first passenger, a rough-looking guy resting his feet on a box labeled Jack, and sharing his seat with a black cat. He's not over-eager to talk to us, but he lets us see his ticket anyway. The cat, seemingly, is even less happy to see us. A few screens further down, we find... a doll? Must belong to someone else on the train. Best take it with us in case they forgot it here. Further south, we run into a young woman who, in contrast to the guy from earlier, is quite happy to see us. We get a good look at her ticket, and a good look at, something else. I mentioned this game was made by a 19-year-old, right? Beyond that is the phone, with a few random numbers and one for something called the Lifeline? And the number is literally all sixes. Well, we don't have a telephone card, so no way to make calls at the moment. Our next passenger is a sullen-looking salaryman who doesn't seem to be in the best frame of mind. He laughs and says it won't be long now until he finds peace. We quickly collect his ticket and get out of there as fast as we can. Our next passenger is a ghost? Okay, we're just going to assume that ghosts ride free. Moving on. Ugh. Hopefully that's the most unsettling thing we see. Is that a soldier? Surely he is. He's saluting us. And what is that headgear? It must be from World War II. And this game is from Japan. Oh no. Thankfully, the soldier gives us his ticket without saying anything, and I don't have to take up time in this video talking about war crimes. At least, not yet. Fingers crossed. Our next passenger, honestly, the first thing that comes to mind every time I see them is that they kind of look like Vivi from Final Fantasy IX. I'm not sure why that's where my mind goes, and it's definitely not intentional since this game predates Final Fantasy IX by about 3 years. But anyway, they give us their ticket without incident. But as we're leaving, they stop us and ask us why we're on this train. We don't have a good answer for that, of course. Then they ask more questions. Why the hurry to die? Did you make the wrong choice? We don't have answers to those questions either, at least not that we're prepared to say aloud. So we move on. Before we can enter the next room, we're stopped by a voice telling us that it's for authorized personnel only. We inform the voice that we've been made assistant attendant, thank you very much, but we're not believed since we're not wearing a uniform. The voice gets an additional dig at us, implying that the only reason we were able to take the other passengers' tickets was because they felt sorry for us. Which, I don't know, that's not the vibe I got from most of them. At any rate, we need a uniform, so it's back to the front of the train to pick one up, which I'll skip straight to. We put on the uniform and it's time to walk all the way back, which I will also skip straight to. Yeah, I'll bring it up again at the end, but suffice it to say the size and linear layout of the train can make parts of Azusa 3.9 a little tedious. Anyway, we make it back to the other end of the train and into the engine room, where we meet a man caked literally head to toe in coal soot. This is Kiriko, and as the engineer, he doesn't need a ticket. So we probably didn't need to go through all that trouble. Oh well. We introduce ourselves in kind and finally get a name for our player character. Hope. Finally having an actually pleasant conversation with someone does a lot to brighten our mood, and our job concluded, we head back to the front of the train to inform the attendant. On the way back... Is that a pile of coal? Wonder what that's doing all the way out here. We pick it up and all of a sudden we get the feeling that we're being watched. We head back to the engine room to give the coal to Kiriko, which he thanks us for. On the way back up, we meet someone we haven't met before. A young girl. Her dress is bright red, the only color we've seen the whole time we've been on this drab, gray train. She doesn't say anything, but we're able to figure out what she wants. We have her doll. She snatches it from our hands, screams, and runs away. We follow her up the train, and each time we catch up to her, she does the same thing. We find her in her seat eventually, next to her doll, and apologize for taking it. She doesn't say anything, but as we turn to leave, beating ourselves up over the whole situation, she begins to laugh. Her laughter is interrupted by a blood-curdling scream. We follow the scream to find the salaryman kneeling on the ground and clutching his throat in agony. This is bad. What do we do? Maybe Kiriko can help. Rushing to the engine room, we tell Kiriko what's happened, and he gives us a pill to take to the man. Thank God. Hopefully this helps. We give the man the pill, and... Damn it, it's even worse now. We inform Kiriko of this, and he's not surprised. Because what he gave us wasn't medicine. It was poison. Kiriko tries to rationalize what he did. After all, in a way, death is the ultimate cure, isn't it? But no. No, it's not. It's murder. Furious, we leave the engine room, leaving Kiriko scratching his head. On the way back up, we run into another ghost, in a different spot from where we found the other one. And the man is gone. Guess Kiriko wasn't lying. Trying to talk to the ghost again causes it to turn into coal. Does that mean the other coal we saw was... We really don't want to talk to Kiriko again. But he's the only one who might have the answers we need. So we leave the coal at the entryway of the engine room and call after him. He calls back and confirms our worst fears. The passengers of this train are all suicidal. Soul shall be relieved of flesh. That soul shall turn to dust, and dust to stone. That stone is burned, and in the end it's what keeps this train running. We tremble in fear as the enormity of what's just been revealed to us sinks in. Fade out, then back in as we sit in our seat, still trembling. We try to snap ourselves out of it, but it doesn't help much. Maybe another walk around the train will help us clear our head. At any rate, it's all we can really do. On our walk, we find that the girl has left her doll again, but we don't take it this time. Thankfully, it seems like the other passengers are okay. For now. We try to talk to Kiriko again, but we just can't bring ourselves to face him. So we head back up. That girl again. Looks like she's lost her doll. Gives us something to do to take our minds off things, at least. We find the doll stuck up in the baggage compartment a few cars down. How did it get up there? We give the girl her doll back, and she gives us a badge. We remember that Kiriko had a similar badge stuck to his cap. We return to the engine room, and we're given another choice. Forgive Kiriko? Yeah. We forgive him. Oh no. That's it. He's gone. Nothing we can do except continue his work. So reluctantly, we feed Kiriko's body into the fire. Once his body has disappeared, we take the badge from his cap. Heading back up the train, the person in the hat is also turned into coal. We knew so little about them. What must they have been going through to end up here? In another of the seats, there's an envelope. Inside is a key and a letter. From Kiriko. He tells us to take the telephone card in his locker and call the lifeline. If we hear nothing, then we can do what we intended to do at the railroad track earlier today. But if we hear anything, then it's not our time. Kiriko's letter concludes with 2 words. Live, hope. We find the phone card in Kiriko's locker. Then we walk up to the phone, take a deep breath, and make a call. After an agonizingly long silence, finally we hear a voice on the other end. Someone crying. Someone who knows our name. We recognize their voice immediately. It's our mother. Our big sister is there too, trying to console her, when our little sister walks in and breaks the news that somebody saw us jump in front of the train. The last thing we hear from the phone is our mother, wailing in grief. As the phone gives us a sign-off message that sounds more like a lecture than anything else, the phone card snaps in half, and we're given another choice. Choose life, or choose death. Here I feel the need to be honest with you all. I assume that if you choose death here, you get an instant game over. But I don't know. I know that for the sake of thoroughness, I should have done a run where I make that choice and recorded it. But every time I get to this point in each of the runs of this game I've played, I can't bring myself to do that. If you want to see it, play it yourself. Maybe you'll be able to do what I can't. So we choose life. For the first time all game, music starts to play, triumphantly underscoring our newfound existential courage. Earlier in the game, talking to the attendant, he says we won't be able to enter the conductor's room, quote, as we are now. But we're different now. We're changed. Maybe we're ready. We walk up to the conductor's office, and the door opens. Inside is the conductor, who compliments us on our work as assistant attendant and introduces himself as Tetsuro Kato. An unremarkable man, at least given the context of our first meeting him. We introduce ourselves in kind and inform him that, as of right now, we're actually quitting our job as assistant attendant, and that we want off this train. Kato says he can't help us and reveals his true form. We try to stop the train ourselves, but it's no good. On the wall is a picture, torn in half. Nothing we can do about that right now. All our options exhausted, we plead with Kato again. He acquiesces. On one condition. We have to bring someone with us. If we can do that, if we can convince one other person on this train not to succumb to despair, he'll let us off. If not, we die like the rest. We leave, and it's revealed that Kiriko is still alive somehow. Through the conversation between Kiriko and Kato, we learn something else. Both of them are rooting for us to make it out of this. Now to try and convince someone. First is the man with the box. Predictably, he won't be moved. The little girl in the red dress still doesn't have much to say. The attendant probably can't be taken with us. He may not even be human, but he helps us out by giving us a badge. With the other 2 badges we've collected, that makes 3. Suffering, hatred, and despair. 3 distinct ingredients for suicidal depression. Trying to talk to the soldier makes the badge of suffering start to glow. A title card, episode Yuki, announces that we've ended up somewhere else. And someone else. Over a jaunty military march, we get the name of the soldier, Jin Aragi. Seemingly, we see the moment he finished his military training. Jin salutes an audience of faceless blobs, and we're thrown farther in time with 5 words that carry a lot of weight. The war ended. We lost. When Jin returns to Japan, his house is burned down, and his entire family is dead. We get a good look at his face for the first time, contorted into a permanent scowl, and we get our first good look at how Azusa 3.9 depicts memory. Most characters other than the one experiencing the memory are rendered as featureless blobs, And the spaces are never fully rendered, only what's important. After all, nobody remembers every facet of every room they've ever been in, only what they interacted with the most. I think it's brilliant. Most of the blobs here can't be interacted with, but one of them recognizes Jin, his childhood friend Shusaku. Shusaku tells Jin that at least one member of his family hasn't died yet, his sister Yuki. Jin runs to the hospital to see her. Cut to a waiting room. Jin is looking for work to support Yuki, who's been blinded and lost the use of her legs. He's sent to an unseen location, but they don't have any work for him to do. This transitions seamlessly to a scene at Yuki's bedside. She can tell something is wrong, but Jin tells her he's fine. Since we've last seen this hospital, the child 2 beds down from Yuki has died. Jin bids Yuki goodbye and resumes his job search. On his way out of the hospital, Jin runs into the doctor, who's looking for the medical fee. Jin pleads to the doctor to give him more time, and the doctor obliges. Back at the job center, Jin gets sent somewhere else. And a montage plays of countless employers all turning him down. It's here that Jin realizes something many veterans all over the world have realized at one time or another. That often the country that asked you to put your life on the line will do nothing for you in return. That they'd rather let you wither and die than live, and in living serve as a reminder to your countrymen of the blood shed in their name. Back in the hospital, Jin is exhausted. Yuki tells him that he should take off work. She doesn't know there's no work for him to take off from. Another meeting with the doctor. Jin is given 1 more week to get the money. Then we reassume control of Hope, and the familiar sound of the railroad crossing plays. We catch up to Jin, in the same spot we were at the beginning of the game. Hopeless, he feels that his only option is to take his own life so his life insurance policy will pay for Yuki's operation. We try to talk him out of it, telling him that it's not right to leave Yuki alone like that. Of course, we've had first-hand experience of what it's like for the siblings left behind. We heard it through the lifeline earlier. Jin is convinced and we fade out. Back at the hospital, the worst has happened. Yuki knew that Jin couldn't find work and that he was driving himself to exhaustion trying to look after her. In her guilt, she did what Jin was just about to do to himself. Fade out, then back in on the railroad crossing. Jin screams in despair, then disappears. Over the empty railroad crossing, the knife is twisted 1 more time. It was all a lie. Yuki was just an orphan who happened to share a name with Jin's sister, and everything we just saw was a setup by Shusaku and the doctor to drive Jin to suicide so they could split the life insurance payout. We return to the train and reassume control of Hope. Where Jin was previously is now, like the others, a stack of coal. Interacting with the coal causes Hope to say something deeply moving. I will live your share as well. Accompanying this is a message that Hope grew a little stronger. We couldn't save Jin, but all is not lost. Let's talk to one of the other passengers. Almost forgot about the one in the hat. We'll need to live their share as well. The young woman is next. She doesn't want to come with us either. The badge of hatred glows, and we're teleported into another sub-episode. This one is called Episode Kaoru. As the episode starts, we're finally given a name for the young woman. Miu. But everyone just calls her Mimi. She's a nerdy high school girl, and for the first time in her life, she's in love. Miu walks to her front door where her friend, named Kaoru like the episode itself, is waiting. In her eagerness to get out the door, she almost forgets her lunch. She must be nervous. Kaoru, seemingly having been told beforehand about Miu's new crush, seems a bit skeptical, and reminds her that anime characters don't count. Miu assures her that yes, her crush is a real person. At lunch, Kaoru presses Miu once again to reveal the object of her affections. Miu finally acquiesces, tells Kaoru to shut her eyes, and kisses her. Kaoru is only taken aback for a brief moment before taking Miu to the storeroom. The narrator intercedes at this point, telling us that we won't be seeing what happens next. Kaoru walks Miu home, and Miu sends her off with another kiss. Back in her room, Miu reminisces about things the game still refuses to show us. Honestly, I think the silliness of this gag clashes somewhat with the tenderness of this story, but it definitely made me laugh. As the night ends, Miu narrates, seemingly talking to Hope, and by extension us. In that moment, we're reminded that whatever happened to her, it can't have been good for her to end up on the Azusa 3-9. The next day, Kaoru tells Miu that she can't walk her home today since she has to stay after class to take a makeup exam. Miu is disappointed, but decides to wait in a nearby classroom until Kaoru is done. Miu notices a letter on Kaoru's desk. Thinking it might be a love letter, she opens it. What she finds shocks her. I put up a warning before the video, but I'm warning you again here. This next part is rough. Immediately, cut to a scene where Miu confronts 3 featureless blobs, and we discover what was in that envelope. Photographs, presumably of Miu and Kaoru in the storeroom. Miu demands the negatives from them, but they don't give them to her. And the scene ends as one of them shouts to grab her. Kaoru finishes her test, but doesn't find Miu in the classroom. Just her bag, which she resolves to give back to her tomorrow. When Kaoru arrives at Miu's house the following morning, Miu doesn't meet her at the door. She just sits in her room, nearly catatonic. Her mother says she's been in her room ever since coming home the previous day and won't tell her what's wrong. Kaoru says she'll just tell the teacher she's sick and that she'll be back again after school to check on Miu. A few text boxes explain that Kaoru visited Miu every day for a week. Then cut to the school, where a bunch of blobs are staring at something on the wall. It's immediately clear to us what's going on, and as Kaoru pushes to the front of the room, she finds out as well. Kaoru finds a letter on her desk. It's from the same scumbag we saw earlier. He tells her he'll give her the negatives if she comes to the abandoned home ec classroom. Kaoru returns to Miu's house where her mother is sobbing. She then enters Miu's room to find that the worst has happened. Miu's mother gives Kaoru a letter, and Kaoru opens it. The letter is from Miu, and tells her that she should run away, far away. Kaoru confronts the scumbags, who mock her to her face. In an instant, the screen is bathed in a deep red. And as we fade back in, Kaoru has enacted revenge, for herself and for Miu. We reassume control of Hope and meet Kaoru at the railroad track. Turns out she was the young woman on the Azusa 39 the whole time. We chide her for what she did, but she brushes us off. After all, if she didn't see to it that justice was done, who would have? We try to convince Kaoru not to do what Miu did, to make a fresh start like Miu wanted her to do. But our pleas fall on deaf ears, and Kaoru vanishes. Another person we couldn't save, struck down in the prime of her life by a world too rotten to see her as a human being. All we can do now is resolve to live her share, and try to save somebody else. The next passenger is the scowling man with the box. Predictably, he has no desire to come with us. But the badge of despair glows, and episode Ribs begins. Ribs? What kind of a name is that? As the episode begins, two as-of-yet unidentified characters are talking about a tattoo of a crossed heart one of them has. The one with the tattoo explains that it means, quote, that God and man are never far apart, end quote, and that the tattoo serves to discourage them from doing bad things. We assume control of the man, and we realize why he was so guarded about himself. In his living room is a mutilated corpse, its blood leaving footprints in a straight line on the carpet. Leaving his house, we get his name for the first time. It's Jack, the same name labeled on the box he had on the train. Jack, short for Jack the Ripper. Though the London police have begun to call him Ribs, in reference to the single rib from each victim he sends them as a calling card. Honestly, I'm not sure if the discrepancies between this Jack and the historical Jack the Ripper are because he's not supposed to be the same guy, or because Sogabe didn't know the history particularly well. It doesn't matter much in any case. We flash back many years to find a child Jack in an orphanage. Interestingly, the other kids, who would likely have been rendered as blobs in the other episodes, are here rendered fully as children, albeit all sharing the same sprite. They even all have names. Presiding over the children is a woman named Renee, who gathers all of them together to sing a song with pretty disconcerting lyrics. The song is interrupted by the arrival of some men who, apparently, have been to the orphanage frequently as of late. Renee leaves to talk to them, and Jack sneaks out of the nursery to see what's going on. Renee stands before 5 blobs, who reveal themselves to be landlords. Renee has been making her payments, but the landlords have decided to use the land for something more profitable than caring for children, so they're forcing her to leave in 3 days. Renee returns and the song resumes, but Renee can tell something's wrong with Jack. Jack reveals that he heard Renee's conversation with the landlords and runs away. Jack spends a week on the streets before returning to find that the orphanage has caught fire. Jack notices one of the landlords in the crowd and realizes that he must have set the fire. In his impotent rage, all he can do is laugh. Later, Jack looks over the charred remains of the orphanage and finds that Renee, and all of the other children, are dead. A locket on Renee's corpse reveals that she was Jack's sister. Jack gathers a rib from each of the charred bodies and scrapes off the tattoo that had been his reminder to never do wrong. We catch up with the adult Jack at a pool hall. At the other end of the hall is a nameless blob, a cop who arrests him on suspicion of murder through an anonymous tip. Jack laughs in his face and reveals that the man who's trying to arrest him is not only a detective, but the man who set the fire that burned down the orphanage, and that Jack has been waiting to exact his revenge on him for 15 years. Turns out Jack even set the anonymous tip himself. The man yells for somebody to shoot Jack, but it's no use. Jack gets his revenge. When we reassume control of Hope this time, the path to the railroad crossing is covered in pools of blood and bloody footprints. We meet up with Jack, and this time we're at a loss for words. Jack understands, and simply requests that when he jumps in front of the train, we throw his box in after him. The box, it turns out, contains the bones of the children that he pulled from their bodies that day at the orphanage. Jack disappears, and we return to the Azusa 3-9. Another death. A short life doomed to end in pointless violence. In many ways, the least sympathetic passenger on this train. But still, a person who loved and was loved in turn. We gather his strength and press on. Only, there's no one left. We couldn't convince anyone to come with us. What do we do now? Out of nowhere, a voice tells us not to give up, and tells us to stop them, whoever they are. The voice came from inside the conductor's office, so we go in, after another choice that, like the previous one, I've never made differently. The conductor is gone, and the little girl's doll sits in the seat in the corner. Examining the drawer in the opposite corner gives us a floor plan of the Azusa, with a room listed that we haven't been to before. Azusa Core. Entry impossible. Searching more thoroughly reveals something else, stuck toward the back of the drawers. A torn photograph depicting the little girl. Comparing the torn photo from the drawer to the one on the wall reveals them to be two pieces of the same photograph. Of the conductor and the girl, his daughter, Azusa, holding hands. Examining the doll again, we come to a realization. That voice that told us to stop her? That was Azusa. Realizing this, we rush toward the back of the train, toward the Azusa Core. On the way there, we find the attendant turned into a ghost, who cheers us on and disappears, leaving Cole, and in so doing giving us his strength. We find Azusa in the engine room, standing over the fire. She jumps into the fire, and we jump in after her. The final episode begins. Azusa 3-9. A conversation plays between Azusa and her father, Kato. She wants to accompany her father to work on the train, and with some gentle urging from Kiriko, Kato takes her with him. When we fade back in, everything is caked in red, like the burning orphanage from earlier. Giant blocks of coal lie scattered about. Chalk outlines, like the ones that marked Kaoru's act of vengeance, dot the ground, as do vials resembling the one that Kiriko kept his poison in. We meet up with Kiriko, but he doesn't remember who we are, and he offers us a pill. We refuse the poison, and Kiriko tells us that the tunnel is collapsing. Better to die quickly than die that way. But no, we will not give in to despair. Never again. We refuse the poison and try to jog Kiriko's memory, try to remind him that he was the one who told us to live in the first place. Before he can remember, a boulder lands on his head. As he dies, his memory finally restored, Kiriko tells us that we have one more badge left. In fact, we've had it ever since we boarded this train. We make it to the front of the train, to the door of the conductor's office, and the final badge glows. The badge of hope. We find ourselves in a small square room with Kato and Azusa, who's floating in the air. Talking to Kato reveals that we're in the Azusa core, where Azusa lives forever by feeding off the souls of those who take their own lives. Kato tries to justify this arrangement, but we know better. This isn't what Azusa wants. She's told us herself, begged us to stop her. And doesn't Kato want all this to stop, too? Why else would he have given us the chance he gave us? It's in this moment that we find out that the person in the hat was Kato this entire time, subtly encouraging us from the moment we stepped on the train. And that he was the voice on the lifeline, too. He and Kiriko have been working together this whole time to give us all we need to put a stop to all this. But Kato will not be stopped without one last fight. He is this train's conductor, and his job is to see that the train keeps moving. He attacks us, and is blocked by Azusa. Kato asks why. Azusa says she wants her daddy back. Azusa falls. Examining her causes her to age an entire lifetime in a single moment. We return to the conductor's office, where a heartbroken Kato tells us that the train will soon stop. Before we part, Kato asks that we take Azusa's doll with us. We do, of course. As we leave, Kato, in a business-like tone that must be the only thing he can do to keep from breaking down, thanks us for our patronage on behalf of the Azusa 3-9. Then, after we're out of earshot, he thanks us again more personally. We stand at the railroad crossing beside Azusa's doll. A crimson train passes by. We give thanks to the passengers on the train, who lent us their strength, and in so doing, saved our life. And to one passenger in particular. A little girl with so much compassion that she chose death over living off the despair of others. Azusa. So, wow, right? Hopefully by now you understand why I have such a high opinion of this game. When I first played through it a couple years ago, I sat in front of my computer screen for what must have been several unbroken minutes just taking in the full impact of what I had just seen. The fact that something this powerful was made by one 19-year-old developer in 2 months is almost incomprehensible to me. That said, I'm not blind to Azusa 3-9's faults. There's the fairly anemic sound design, for one, and the fact that most of the time in-game is spent walking back and forth along a massive straight line, which fits the conceit of the game taking place on a train, but which inevitably makes parts of it tedious. However, most of Azusa 3-9's flaws, I think, come down to one immutable fact. Speaking from experience, when you're a young writer, you tend to feel a need to situate your writing at emotional extremes, either entirely distant and cerebral or entirely sincere and earnest. Azusa 3-9 definitely goes the latter route, and there are points in the story that were clearly undergirded by a desire not only to bring out an emotional response from the player, but to bring out the most extreme emotional response possible. And sometimes, I think the way that Sogabe always aims for the jugular ends up backfiring just a little. Like, did Jin's story of an impoverished soldier trying to take care of his sister really need to end with the reveal that Yuki wasn't even his sister in the first place? Did Kaoru's story of a young love brutally torn apart by homophobia and sexual violence need to end with a level of over-the-top bloodshed that feels more at home in Kill Bill? And did we even need a story following a literal serial killer in which a half-dozen children get burned alive? All of these stories are still powerful, but I think they'd be a little more powerful without some of the extra business that makes them, at times, feel a little disconnected from reality, even when bearing in mind that the game is inherently fantastical to begin with. Put simply, the game was made by a talented but occasionally angsty teenager, and sometimes it feels like it. And then there's the ending. I really like it, but something about it does bother me a little bit, and that's the way the game frames Azusa's sacrifice. It's a powerful moment, but I wonder if it doesn't butt up against some of the game's other themes a bit. After all, in a game about suicide, it's odd to have a character choosing to die be treated as heroic, isn't it? Still, at the end of the day, none of these issues in any way keep me from asserting wholeheartedly that, to my knowledge, Azusa 3.9 is the first truly great RPG Maker game. Like the best of punk rock, it's rough around the edges and technically primitive, but it's made with such sincerity that at the end of the day, none of that really matters. A sincerity that's only really possible in the world of RPG Maker, where solo devs like Sogabe are given unrestricted freedom to make whatever they want. Hopefully you've been motivated to give Azusa 3.9 a shot as well. I know you might not be interested in playing a narrative-driven game like this after watching a video that gives the whole narrative away, but I still think it's worthwhile to play it yourself. After all, a connection is formed between you and the characters when you're the one moving them around, in a way that doesn't quite happen when you're watching a video about them. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video. I think there's no better way to sign off than by doing what I want to do and letting the artist speak for himself, without the intrusion of any commentary on my part. These are the words that conclude Azusa 3.9, after the credits have rolled.